Sitaram viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Hindu Perspective, a program prepared and presented by the Board of Swaha for the purpose of bringing enlightenment elucidation to the national community about the various tenets of Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma. Today, once again, we have in our program our panelists. We have the president of Swaha, Pandit Ishwar Madhu Maharaj. We have one of the directors, member of the board of directors of Swaha Dharmandal, Pandit Umrat Maharaj, who is also the spiritual leader of the Swaha Bhakti Jyot Mandali. And we have with us as our guests for tonight one of our younger Pandits, Pandit Dr. Lomas Prasad, who is the immediate past vice president of Swaha, as well as the deputy spiritual leader of the Swaha Sukh Shanti Bhakti Mandali. And of course, we'll get into some more introduction as we move on with our program. But as we normally do, we start with our opening prayer, and we'll ask Pandit Lomas, who is our guest for today, to lead us in simple opening prayer.
Om Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Ekadantaya Vidmahi, Vakratundaya Dhimahi, Tanudanti Prachodayat. Holy Shri Gajanan Swami ki Jai.
Thank you, Panditji. And we are very fortunate this evening to have with us Pandit Dr. Lomas Prasad, who has graciously agreed to be part of the discussions. And of course, last week, Pandit Ishwar and myself would have spoken a little bit about science and religion. And Pandit Lomas, who will give you a full introduction of himself, is a scientist, of course, by education, and of course, a spiritualist as well, and is in the ideal position to lend some substance to what Pandit Ishwar and myself would have presented last week. Now, very briefly, Pandit Dr. Lomas Prasad is the grandson of the Shankaracharya Swaha and the son of Pandit Gyandev Prasad, who is a member of the board of Swaha. Panditji holds a doctoral qualification from Imperial College, of course, having been given a scholarship to study, and highly accomplished together with his wife, Arati. And of course, to give us a little more details about his qualification, Panditji, we'll just ask you to introduce yourself.
Firstly, Sitaram, everyone, and to all the listeners and viewers of the Hindu Perspective. I'm happy to be here this week, to join in the discussion. Just a little bit about myself. So I attained a scholarship to go and study at Imperial College London. I graduated in the program of Advanced Mechanical Engineering for my master's, and then I went on to pursue my doctorate in biomedical research. And then, so you can fast forward a few years. I'm currently in the US, working in the Department of Veteran Affairs, basically for the US government, doing biomechanics research.
Thank you, Panditji. That's very impressive. Certainly a lot more accomplished than the other members of the panel. So I don't know if any of the other panelists, before we move into the discussions, if there's anything you'd like to say, anything specific you'll ask of Panditji to share in terms of his own experiences. We know that Panditji is very humble, and of course, we just share basic information. So just for the sake of our viewers, our listeners, if there's anything specific you want to know from Panditji as it relates to his experience, and then of course you can get into our program.
Yeah, Sitaram, yeah. So I can't well, as a pundit, I can't separate the other part of my life also as a principal and as a teacher, right? So to Pandit Lomas, the reality is we have parents and grandparents primarily looking on. I would hope we have some young people too. So maybe before we get into the discussion on science and spirituality and so on, maybe you could do a little career guidance here. What were the subjects you did at Form 6? I think you went to St. Mary's, right?
Yes.
And then at university and so on. Just to give encouragement, I hope that Omadat's son is writing CSEC. My daughter is writing CAPE. Just to give that little boost in confidence and motivation to our younger people who may be looking. What are the subjects and that enable you to get that scholarship and get into the university, Imperial College?
Of course. So firstly, I would say, it will be difficult at that stage in life because I also went through it. You kind of have to know what you like. So in terms of going through, so in Trinidad, we know that you have to choose business or sciences. So if you go through the science route, you do maths, chem, physics, that is important. And that's also important if you want to do medicine. But with the business, you have principles of business, etc. But in terms of pursuing a career and following my path, so I knew that, something I like was physics, and something that is a bit controversial. People usually don't like maths. I had no problem with it. So if you know that, your child or the person who is contemplating their career path, they have some kind of affinity towards the sciences, definitely they can explore the medical field and the engineering field. And of course, a big part of the question is if you want to stay in Trinidad or if you want to explore your other options worldwide. Because in Trinidad, there's only limited things you can do. It's sad to say, but that's the reality. And that's the reality of the world. So you have to kind of educate the children and in terms of like 10 years in the future, you have to plan properly. So that, to give an example, something that's not very highly considered in Trinidad, but it's huge in the US, is the IT sector and in terms of software programming. And they are the most highly paid in the US. And that falls also under the category of the science-minded kids, in terms of you must know some maths and you must know some physics and programming, etc. So I would say a good foundation to start at is expose the children to various fields and try to teach them and make them understand what each entails. Because obviously I can't go through the entire thing in this short program, but try and expose them to as much as possible so they can make an informed decision.
Thanks, Pandit Panaji. That's excellent advice here.
Okay, Parilomas, I will to ask you a question from the point of the youth, being one of the youngest pundits we have in our midst in Swaha. And, usually we have the statement where you cannot mix religion and studies. It's either one of the two. But from a very young age, from birth, that you were able to, follow the path of our lineage, even up to the stage where you are located, performing your duties diligently, responsibly, getting the highest qualification, and still be able to maintain Sanatan Dharma. Right? Because up to recently, we had situations, I personally, where the parents were insisting the child cannot go to temple, cannot go to Rama, cannot learn because they have to study. But you as a young pundit, one of the youngest pundits, you were able to do both. Because as Pandit Jaya mentioned, you are assistant spiritual leader in Sukhanti Bhakti Mandali, and there are programs on TV where you're carried on service actually reading, learning scriptures. So, I think would be a good gesture that, you speak a bit about that, how you balance, yourself between studies and being a good Hindu, maintaining Sanatan Dharma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question, Panaji. So in terms of that excuse that people tend to use where there's, the child have exam or have to study and the exam is like 5 weeks away, that's basically a poor excuse. And I can speak because I went through that also. So in terms of maintaining your dharma and, going to temple, it teaches you just at the basic level, it teaches you like time management, appreciation for your culture, the people you associate with. It has so much benefits in terms of your quality of life as a child growing up, in terms of a support system. You might have other kids or other children in temple also write an exam. You can, communicate with them, network with them, share that experience together. And also something people kind of overlook, they kind of put the material the material gains or accomplishment above the spiritual. But later on, as you get older, and I'm sure most of us would experience this, with all the material stuff you have, it can only take you so far in terms of learning a specific topic, being, intellectual in a certain niche topic or expert. But ultimately, it's all about life. It's all about spiritual development. And that's where going to temple, reading scriptures, participating in satsang, that's where we get that experience. We instill that in the children from young growing up. And all of us would have experienced this. The Shankaracharya, we were lucky enough to experience his words we always emphasize that we must study our work, but we must also practice Panditai. And because that was instilled in us, all of us, I can say, probably are successful because of that. So,
Thank you very much, Pandit. And I want to ask one question. You have accomplished a lot. Are you considered a genius?
I don't think so.
And the point I'm making is that a lot of times persons would look at so what age did you have your PhD?
At 26 or 27, around there. Yeah.
Your doctoral degree?
Yes, because I went straight through. So I completed my undergrad, went to master's, and without any breaks in between, and then finished my PhD.
Right.
So it's kind of it's younger than usual. Yeah.
But it is pretty young. And as Panditji is saying, you don't have to be a genius to do that. As well as you can balance your life, and you should have your life balance, because sometimes they will say, well, Pandit Lomas, he is brighter than the average person. He would have had other opportunities. We all have opportunities, all of us. And as Pandit Umnad rightly said, as you said, we have that grounding. And through that grounding, understanding what is important, that each of us were able to become professionals in our own field, as well as contribute towards the development and propagation of Sanatan Dharma. And as you rightly said, there's no, at least for our generation, we cannot say what's going to happen later on. But at least for us, there's no Panditai without the Shankachar. He's a foundation for us. And he always said, grandson, education is important. That was something that he insisted on. And in many ways, he has supported each and every one of us to ensure that we are qualified academically, professionally, and that is being used for the purpose of propagating Dharma. Which Panditji will bring us to the other part of the discussion. We have had numerous programs on Indian Arrival Day, and we spoke about the Indian diaspora. And there's also what you call the second diaspora, so that our ancestors who arrived on the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, and then following that, others, children of those same ancestors would have left and gone to different places. For example, yourself, your Dharmpatni Arti. And the experience that you have had in Trinidad, of course, you're moving into a different society. Well, here, there's a different level of equality. There's a different level of representation, where we are almost 50-50. And we have politicians who will defend us in case anyone may be trying to take away our rights. When you go to a place like the United States, of course, being a Hindu, in the sense that we are Hindus, not just Hindu influenced practice like yoga, which is widespread. Being a Hindu in the way that we are, you are a minority. And how do you maintain that? How do you maintain a practice? How do you help to propagate Dharma, given that you're in a different environment? And of course, there are so many external forces that would be impacting upon you, and of course, members of your family.
Yes, Panditji, I had mentioned a very important point in terms of, the path that I take, and this might be shared with other individuals who are on a similar path. There are a lot of challenges that you would face, coming from home where you practice your religion in a certain way. There's a certain standard, a certain format you're accustomed to. And then you go to a foreign land. First of all, there would be a type of adaptation that has to happen. So there's the difference in culture that you would encounter. You are in an unfamiliar environment, different surroundings, different customs. And we know that Sanatan Dharma, there are many groups that exist under this umbrella. And even within Hinduism, there are different denominations. So it's very diverse. So one of the challenges that you would experience, that I experience, is that the way that we do certain things back home, it's very different. So for example, like a Sunday morning service or satsang. So these are things you would have to adapt. And even more so, another challenge would be the accessibility of certain ingredients or items that you would use for, say, puja or any type of satsang or prayers or anything. Because of the limited availability, or it just doesn't exist. And I'm sure it exists. I'm sure this case is also true for you, Panditji, for all of you. When you have to do puja back home in Trinidad, you would have to make adaptations. So the same thing exists here. So if you can't get pan leaf or supari, whatever, you would have to, find alternatives, etc. But in terms of the society up here, I'm giving my personal experience in terms of society up here versus Trinidad. It's very different, as you said. You are a minority here. There are no political powers, quote unquote, that can fight for your cause. It's more about community based, and it's not just like a community. It's more like an international community because it's made up of Hindus from different parts of the world. So it's a different mix of individuals, I would say. So there are challenges that exist, but I would say one of the motivations that keeps me going is the need to know I can give my example to preserve, your family traditions. So we are deeply rooted in this practicing Hinduism and being Pandits. There's this need to honor the values instilled in us by our parents, our ancestors, etc. Also, as Hindus, we're encouraged to go through personal growth, introspection, and also develop spiritually. And we do this by engaging in different spiritual practices. So there's that need for spiritual development. And also there's there's a certain type of spiritual fulfillment that comes from, when you celebrate the different festivals that you're accustomed to, although it might be different from back home, because again, I mentioned the challenges. And one example I can give you is something that people in Trinidad might take for granted. There are all these different festivals that we celebrate. There's Kartik, Ganesh Utsav, where we go out into quote unquote nature. We sit on the ground, on the sand, we perform puja, we go in the water, we submerge in Murti. So if you take the example of those individuals, those Hindus living in these cities, these large cities, these quote unquote concrete jungles, the opportunity to perform this type of worship is very rare. So that's something that those back home in Trinidad should not take for granted, should grasp at every opportunity to go and perform a puja, celebrate these festivals, because it's totally different when you come up to a foreign land.
Thank you very much, Pandit. I'll ask Pandit Omerat if there's anything, and then Pandit Ishwar.
Well, yes, to extend on Pandit Loma's point, because, through, I would say, my good karma, I've been able to travel throughout Canada, USA with Parmacharya performing yagi, etc. And I agree 100% with what Pandit Loma said, that even when you go there, adaptations have to be made. But Pandit Loma's mentioned an important point about the culture, which is totally different. Because, for example, I just use an example. I love that quote unquote, so you keep yourself clear, that in Trinidad, satsang going on, you will not see anyone eating or drinking while satsang is in progress. But up there, in certain parts of the states of Canada, that's something normal. So that difference of culture, I'm not saying you have to follow that, but there in itself, you see there's a difference in culture. Because the first time I went and I saw that, I was shocked. How they could do something like that. The Pandit drinking on the Singhasan. But when you analyze and see, that is the culture that they practice. But when you look at the bigger picture, is that maintenance of dharma is what is important. Now, we're not saying whether right or wrong. But the point about it, what Pandit Loma's mentioned, is that the opportunity to maintain dharma, to be able to perform rites and rituals, to be able to perform all the sacrifices are important. Another example I could give, the first time I went to New York, and when they perform the puja, they bring some palm leaf, I think black, like a rotten in. And that was like gold for them. In Trinidad, you will not lose something like that. You'll put it away. You have some flowers that wrinkle, not fresh, but they will use it. So the difficulty, as Pandit Loma's mentioned, in maintaining dharma is very, very high. But like where Pandit Loma is in Florida, I guess most of the things are available. But he's speaking more of like Canada and certain parts of New York, certain parts of the United States, especially excluding Florida. You have these challenges. But what I would be very, very I'm very happy about is that individuals in those places do everything to maintain dharma. And this is where the social media aspect of it comes in a great part of Sanatana Dharma at this point in time. Because we have all these satsangs. Whenever I perform, you have the opportunity to stream through via Facebook, where individuals, wherever they are, they could join in, they could see, because we have messages coming in on a regular basis where, they appreciate that, that they're able to join. You know, I have one person that follow Paramacharji whenever I do live stream for him. I know she'll message her every time that, you know, he's like a haven for her. Hearing his voice is like Amrit. That where she is, there's nobody, there's no Pandit, no temple that she can relate to. But hearing through Sanatan Dharma, getting the learnings through via social media, she's able to at least perform practices of Sanatan Dharma. Whenever we have Hawan, etc., or pujas, whatever, a live stream, she's able to follow along. So I think that this is a very important part of our culture at this point in time in maintaining Sanatan Dharma out of Trinidad and Tobago, you know, via live stream, via technology, as we say. Even though it may be difficult, but at least the practices could be maintained using these platforms.
Thank you, Pandit. And before I pass over to Pandit Ishwar, and again, it's just a open question, maybe Pandit Lomas, anyone. You know, the discussion is how do we maintain and adopt in a foreign land, and this case here speak about the US. But I mean, we need to be mindful that when our ancestors came here, that they adopted also. That what we have in Trinidad is certainly not what exists in India. And I'm sure that persons, the same way that we'll go to the US, as Pandit Oman had said, and we see practices that, and we'll say, well, that's strange, because our frame of reference is Trinidad. In the same way that someone will come from India, and they look at us, and they say, well, those practices are strange, because their frame of reference is what they do in India. But I think that the overall principle, which I think we have seen manifested here in Trinidad by our ancestors that came from India, as well as the second diaspora, persons like Pandit Lomas and others, is that adaptation. Our ancestors, they have survived and grown because of adaptation. And this is where a lot of the education, the critical thinking, the problem solving comes in. If we understand why we do things that we do, which is enlightened Hinduism, and we all here belong to the same organization, which is Swaha. And the foundation of Swaha, the philosophical underpinning of the organization, is that of enlightened ritualism, that we understand why we do what we do, so that you don't need to use rotten pan leaf, you can use little saucers or katora, because the idea is that you're offering a seed to Bhagwan, or you're offering a leaf. If you don't have pan bearer, you use something that can substitute for dessert. When you offer water, you know, if you don't have a mango leaf, you can use a spoon, because the idea is that you have bathed in the murti. So that when we understand these things, then we can adapt to them. So that what Pandit Lomas is experiencing and practicing now is what our ancestors have practiced when they came here. But the point I'm making is that our frame of reference, you know, we need, in my view, we have to be careful and don't believe that what the US is doing is different or wrong simply because it is not what we have done, because others will come and look at us and they say the same thing. I think that what we do here works for us, and what you do there, Pandit Lomas, that works for you. And that becomes the standard that you will live by, and the practices that you will have to practice, that becomes your new norm. So I don't know if that's, you know, it's just a different perspective to the discussion. And it's just for, you know, our viewers to contemplate. I mean, at the end of it, we throw out all these ideas, and then we just have persons contemplating and well responding to us also. Right? So,
yes. So, yes, Pandit, you make a very valid points in terms of, yeah, so we're saying there are adaptations that happen, but we're not insinuating now that it's incorrect or it's wrong. Yeah. But I think we can all agree that, yeah, it may be different and there may be cultural differences, but in terms of practicing, you know, our rituals, spiritual endeavors, we will all be happy as long as it's sanctioned from the scriptures. So I think that's the basis we operate under. So once it's sanctioned by the scriptures, we're okay with it. And you make your alterations as you see fit.
Yeah. Pandit Ishwar?
Yeah, no, I like that point, and I mean, I agree totally that adaptations are necessary from time to time, as long as it doesn't compromise the whole ethos of really what is taking place. So, and you know, as you were talking about adaptations here, just recently, I saw a documentary on the benefits of, and Pandit Lomas may know about this too, the benefits of eating on the banana leaf or the fig leaf, right? And how important that is. But look at in Trinidad, sometimes you go to a bandara, to a puja, and people complain if they see that you're eating in the paper sohari leaf, right? And not, or in a plate. God forbid you're eating in a plate rather than on the sohari leaf. But when our ancestors came here, they started using Sohari leaf because why? It was growing wild all over in the bush, wherever they were. In India, they don't eat on Sohari leaf, it's banana leaf. But we don't cut banana leaf to eat on, we eat on Sohari leaf. So it's just something I'm throwing in to show how absurd sometimes, we may condemn something and want to jump and support something else when at the end of the day, really is the philosophy and the ideology that we should be looking at. And one observation I wanted to make, Punit Thomas and but Umadat, who, as he mentioned, would have experience, having performed Yagya or been part of Yagya's, doing puja abroad. And so too, Panajayat and myself also traveling, you will observe certain things. And on social media, I see it in particular in the US, Canada, and throughout the US. I've noticed a lot of young people, Pandit Dr. Lomas Prasad could tell us a little bit more, in the temples, and I assume it's temples, and you see almost everyone in the congregation, the young people could play harmonium, dholak, tabla, and sing, and they know basic Hindi too. So I don't know if it is because they are separated from, everyone else here in Trinidad and Tobago, that they hold on to whatever classes there may be and whatever little opportunity they get in the temple. Because I'm amazed, because we go to Mandir and sometimes you're struggling to get 2 or 3 young people together in the group. Sometimes you have in excess. Other times we don't have them coming to the fore, right? And when I look and I see New York, I see Toronto, I see Orlando, we see a lineup, a battalion of people waiting to sing and play music and so on. I don't know, Lomas, if you have noticed that. In some places, maybe not everywhere.
Yes, I agree. I think it's down to there's a different mentality when it comes to learning like these instruments and maintaining our culture in terms of the practicing music and Hindi and etc. So that's one of the challenges, I guess, pundits back in Trinidad and Tobago they would face, because I know the younger ones, they tend to shy away and not be involved. And I think it's a different mindset. Maybe they don't see the advantages of learning these types of skills, and maybe it should be approached in a different way, showing them that if you learn to play the harmonium, maybe one day you could be entertainer, a Bollywood singer, something like that. I don't know, but yeah, I think it goes on. It goes on to be a different type of mindset, maybe.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I believe, again, I mean, we people like, I mean, all of us here, including Pandit Lomas, Pandit Ishwar, Pandit Loma, we are all of the same generation, and we are 4th generation, I believe. Indo-Trinidadians, right? Our fathers, grandfather didn't come from India, maybe great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather. And at that time, there was a greater sense of community because, again, you were in a minority. So therefore, you would hold together. It's very similar to when, just to make a scriptural reference, when Hanuman met Vibhishan in Lanka. You're in a city and you can identify with something. And because you can identify with that, you find some sense of connection, you find comfort, you find solace in that. And sometimes in places like a large place like the United States, that can be lonely for a particular group. If you find comfort in a temple, you hold on to culture because it's not widespread as it is in Trinidad. Now in Trinidad, there's so much for persons to do, so much competition for time. So that persons have started to take things that were important, they have started to take that for granted. And then you find that you have that loss of that desire to participate, etc. I'm thinking that in the United States might be a little different because, I mean, you're not accepted widely as, a group in society. And therefore, when you can find that comfort with each other, then you will obviously congregate. And that desire to contribute, to be part of, to have a part of a culture embedded in you would lead to you learning some Hindi, and taking an opportunity to learn harmonium, tabla, and all of those things. It's like how you had a West Indian store and all of those things. It's really the coming together of a community. And I think that, from a sociological perspective, that is the reason that you see growth and togetherness of a small group in a wider society. So, those are some of the things that we'll observe. It's completely different from Trinidad. And, it's good for us to have, and our viewers to have this type of perspective from someone who have lived both in Trinidad and the United States now, and can share both set of experiences.
But I think more fundamental than that, Panajay, that being I say in these environments, and I think a few programs back when we were discussing I think was putting into family, etc. How you mentioned the family basic unit in society. If you notice, most of these temples, I don't point it must be able to attest to this also. You don't see one person coming, the family comes. When you go to the temple there, hardly ever you see the children only, or the parents only, or one parent. Well, if they have a normal family, parent, husband, wife, children. Most of the time, the family come to the temple. And if you notice that, I don't want to make it sound bad, but in these sort of settings, is a case of, putting yourself forward. That, okay, my family, my mother was a singer in the temple. My father was a drummer. My father was a harmonium player. Therefore, my children should be something like that too. So it's encouragement from parents that will have the children. That's why I see so many youths, because when you're looking even on Facebook or you're looking at program, be there physically present also. Like for example, when you go to Florida to do your gear, at the temple there, you'll see families. Mother, father playing drum, mother playing harmonium, mother singing, daughter chorusing. I know this sort of interchanging. So there's a greater family unit present in these places, as Panajera mentioned, maybe because of the peer pressure of being a minority, as we say, as compared to Trinidad. Because normally, most of the time, Trinidad, the parents will come, mother, father, the children tired. They don't come from school. They have exam. They sleep in. They go on Savannah. They have to go wherever. But in places like these, come hell or high water, on a Sunday morning, family come to temple. On a weekly, whatever service, family come to the temple. Have a year every night. You put aside that time to go to the temple and also be involved. Because from what I've noticed is that the ones that are involved in the temple, right, if I lack of a better term, they are the ones that are recognized. So the case of also within the society of Hinduism, that you also establish yourself as a person of prominence. So this is a motivating aspect. This is why they perform these actions. So one way of maintaining the culture and the dharma, etc., is by being involved in these things. So I would say more than being minority, that the reason why you have so much of the young ones attending these services, etc., in a foreign land as compared to Trinidad, because it becomes a family event. It's not an individualistic event as in Trinidad. Because you go to temple, Ishwar have his temple, Panajairat, and I'm sure you could say, without them thinking twice, that sometimes parents can't go see the children. When you ask them, well, the child tired, he waked late last night, he studied the truck this morning, he went out with his friends. So when in other societies, as Panajai mentioned, a minority society, that is a priority, that the family, go to temple together, the parents are involved in the temple, therefore there's a natural transition, like our family, Shankaracharya, Pandit, our uncles are Pandit, my father, right? So it's automatic that, we expected that we also do that. So it's an inbuilt sort of culture that is within you, and in that way too, the culture is maintained.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And again, coming back to the same point about, Hanuman in Lanka, where he saw the flag, he saw the Tulsi, and those are things that he identified with. And when you're in a place and you can identify with anyone, you're looking for connection. Sometimes these small groups, they provide that for you. So certainly, those things are what, some of the reasons that we observe these things. Now, Panalomas, one of the questions that we wanted to ask you, living in that foreign land, being a person of, intelligence, Hinduism has been influential across the world. And as we said, maybe in the sense that we practice it, we're in Vedic practices, but we may term traditional practices. Obviously, the US is not a society like that. Trinidad, when you were here, you would know that Diwali is recognized as a public holiday. We practice all of these different religious occasions, and even places I've worked. While, let's say for Shivratri, the managers may not be Hindus, but they'll know that Shivratri is a night you wait for the internet. So they'll say, okay, Jai, you don't need to come to work the next day. I know that you're going to wake out for the entire night. You're going to wait till 12. So that is not public holiday, but the entire society is aware of Shivratri, of Navratri, as you said. Things like Ganesh Utsav. We have massive parades on the road. Durga, Utsav, all of that, so that the entire country is aware of these things. And that influence, things like food, doubles and all of that is very, very popular across the country. In fact, it is part of the cultural landscape of our country. Now, in the US, while, the majority is a Christian society, what have you observed in terms of the influence? How has the influence of Hinduism, how is that manifested within the society? Either in, areas out of the temple, where you see the different practices that may be influenced by some of our philosophy or some of our practices.
Yes. So thinking about it, I think, it's difficult to answer that question in terms of exact influences in terms of Hinduism. One example we can give is, so we know that Diwali is one of the more popular celebrational festivals that we celebrate. And of course, I think in the US, it's pretty well known because those of you might be aware, for the White House, the president, he lights the deer. I think they also do it in Canada also, where they light a deer for Diwali. It's well known. So in terms of, I wouldn't say influence, it's just that there are Hindu festivals that are known and people are familiar with. So another one might be Pagwa. But in terms of influence in society and because how Hinduism exists in the US, so far what I've observed in my brief time is it's mostly isolated into like these different pockets of societies that, practice Hinduism. It isn't like, the norm in society, basically.
What about things like, okay, for example, elements of the dharma, things like for yoga, for example? Because I know that in the US, that's a big part of it. I mean, it's taken to a different level, right?
Yeah, now you're going to say more controversial because, there's like, I think there's some type of yoga involving like goats and babies, like crazy, all kind of craziness, like cats and all these things. So I think, I mean, that's one example, but sadly, I think it's more, it's become kind of like degraded how it's, because I guess the inherent nature of the American society and the kind of what they place as, or the lack of morals, I guess, and what they put on a pedestal, what they see, the how the society is built is more on like attention and seeking attention and fame and money. And that's the sad fact. And so in terms of, I'm trying to think, I'm not seeing any more major influences.
Because, I mean, we could look at the increase in vegetarianism and veganism and all of that, but I mean, we cannot say that
But that isn't because of Hindus.
Yeah, that's for other reasons.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But maybe I could just mention, I know, not to contradict Pandit Lomas, I don't want to say, but if you look at, like, for example, New York, the rise of Hindu practices in New York, in particular, we have a lot of the Guyanese and Trinidadians present, right? It is very, very high. For example, we have recently they named one of these streets in New York, Little Guyana, right? Where most of the Guyanese are there. We have a lot of the puja stores. They're right there to have the big Diwali celebration. Recently had a huge Pagwa celebration. So, as I mentioned, there are certain parts, like for example, New York, certain parts of Canada, where the Ratacharya, recently had the Ratacharya parade, where you see the Indians together with whites, right? They parade the streets of New York. I know which street it was, through the main streets, chanting Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, and people joining in, clapping, dhol playing, all these things. So what I'm saying is that certain parts of the states, I would say that is not as prevalent, but I think where most of the Indians, most of the Hindus living in places like in New York City, certain parts of Florida, Jacksonville, etc., certain parts of Canada, right, where you have a lot of the Indians and Hindus, a lot of these festivals are becoming more and more and more prominent. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because, I'm on social media most of the time, a lot of time. So you see a lot of the, members of a lot of the groups, etc., argue to their group, etc., and you see all that they are doing. And you see that, they perform a lot of the religious festivals, even Pandit Rabidat in Orlando there. Every year he will do his Holika Dahan in his temple yard. Every year he will go and perform his Kartik celebration. Every year he'll perform his Diwali celebration. He'll perform Phagwa, etc. So many of the Hindu rituals, etc., that we speak about is maintained where there are a lot of the Hindu community present. Now, even in places like Germany, in Australia, in Russia, the Hare Rama Hare Krishna movement, the Sai movement is becoming very, very, very huge, where you have these people going through the whole streets, chanting Hare Rama Hare Krishna. They walk up to somebody, you know what I mean, and the person's just, hey, brother, chant Hare Rama Hare Krishna, and just jump up and sing Hare Rama Hare Krishna, things like that. And you see the following that they have is sometimes hundreds. In these countries, they also have the Ratacharya, where they go through the streets, and a lot of people following. So I think that whereas in some parts it doesn't exist, it exists in a lot of parts also. And with regards to the actual, as Panelomas mentioned, the religious ceremonies. Now the yoga part, that is another part by itself, right? That is more of a commercial thing. 10 minutes yoga meditation for $50 US, whatever, that's become commercialized. But you talk about the actual religious ceremonies that we practice in Trinidad, the Kartik and the Phagwa, the Holika Dahan, the Diwali celebration, and other things. If as a matter of fact, you wouldn't believe the amount of artists from Trinidad leave Trinidad shores and go to America, go to Canada, go to the US, to other parts of the US to perform in occasions. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. So, in this way, the culture from Trinidad is present in a great way by the citizens of the country and also by others on the outside.
Just to clarify, so Pandit Umarat, I totally agree with you in terms of what you just said. So yeah, we know that there are groups that practice Hinduism and they must be commended for their efforts. So we have Pandit Ravira, there's Pandit Umesh, Pandit Atma, etc.
Yes.
Pandit Varish Vashish in Canada. So they must be commended for their efforts. What I was speaking previously on was if the practicing Hindus and the culture of Hinduism and Hindus, if it has permeated the workspace or public policy, like how we experience it back home in Trinidad, which I think is debatable. I don't think it has reached that level yet. But I totally agree with your point.
There's one thing I noticed. So I know in New York, I think this year Diwali is going to be a school holiday, and I know there was the Diwali Day Act, and this is just from my reading, which was proposed by one of these congresswomen, and I guess it will be debated in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate and so on, in terms of making it a federal holiday, because it's much more than just the Trinidadian and Guyanese diaspora or second diaspora that are there. I think the amount, Pandit Lomas could tell us about the amount of Indian origin doctors, engineers, software engineers that he spoke about. I think when I saw the last Apple presentation that they had where they launched all their new products and so on, you're seeing so many Indian software engineers and some of the top people there that are working with these companies. So maybe all of that is a reason for certain changes. So whether or not mainstream or the majority of people understand or appreciate it, certainly it's in the White House, it's in Canada in Parliament. We saw UK also, who incidentally have a Indian Prime Minister at present, or a person of Indian origin, Hindu Prime Minister also. So it does augur well for the future. But we're talking about yoga, and I want one point not to be lost at all. We of Swaha totally support, of course, the practice of yoga, right? And none of the pundits mean anything otherwise. And I'm saying this because I want to all our viewers to wish you a happy International Day of Yoga today, right? The 21st is the day of yoga. And incidentally, tonight while you're watching this program, one of our executive members, Mrs. Ambika Maharaj, right, who all our panelists know well, she's actually given a lecture at Mahatma Gandhi Institute with the Indian High Commission, also in terms of yoga and meditation, its impact on students, because at Swaha Hindu College, they do yoga on a weekly basis. They do meditation every single day. So to all of our viewers and I would say followers, yoga, yes, there are many different ways, and in many respects, we may say it has become commercialized. It has become adopted in various ways and adjusted to suit a particular need. But we are talking about the fundamental concepts and ideology of yoga. We fully endorse, and again, I want to thank I have to say the Indian High Commission and Mahatma Gandhi Institute for assisting us, because even at the school, Panajada Pandit Umar, but Lomas may know a little bit, certainly your father will know quite well. We would have the practitioners from the Indian High Commission and Gandhi Institute coming up. So to Gandhi to teach hundreds of children the practice of yoga, authentic yoga. So on this special day, as we are lucky to have Pandit Dr. Lomas with us, I just didn't want to go without mentioning that. I think it's 2015 or 2014 United Nations proclaimed yoga as being something of extreme value that the entire world should hold there. And then from 2015, June 21st, has been celebrated all over the world as International Day of Yoga. Right, Panajida?
Thank you very much, Pandit, and that's valuable information. And just Pandit Lomas mentioned one point in terms of policy, and I think that it is only through policy that things are recognized. It's the same thing that happened in Trinidad, that our ancestors here for so long, and I think it was I can't remember the year, but it's not ancient history that Diwali Day was given as a public holiday. And it's good to see Pandit Lomas. I think that the U.S. society is moving in the right way, and I mean diversity, obviously. I mean, it's every society is focused on the diversity. The extent to which it is being implemented and accepted, that's a different story. But once it starts at the right level, then obviously it becomes part of the society. And in the same way that we have all of these different movements, LGBTQ, TQ, etc. They're advocating for what is important to them, and that's commendable. And in the same way that persons in the U.S., if you're a citizen, then it is your right also to advocate for that which is important to you. In the same way that we in Trinidad would advocate for what is right to us. So the diversity is a reality, but recognizing that is not enough. You want inclusion, you want equality, and in order to get inclusion and equality, then you need to advocate. And that worked in Trinidad, and of course, I'm sure that in time, we'll see it manifesting itself in different parts of the world. It has already started. So, Pandit Lomas, we wanted you to talk a little bit about the science, but we are out of time. So we are hoping that maybe you'll be willing to come on another program, whether it be next week, or you can let us know. But certainly, there were certain topics that we discussed at the last program that we would like you to give us your view on, especially that, as you said it so beautifully, that intersection between science and religion. Our viewers will be interested in hearing that part of it. But I think that, this discussion we have had was very insightful, and we are grateful for your for coming onto the program and, of course, sharing your experience and sharing your views. I think that, we are very proud of you, not just as a Pandit of Swaha, but of course, at least for myself and for Pandit Umrat, as a cousin, and of course, a cousin-in-law for Pandit Ishwar. We are very proud of you. You have accomplished a lot in a short time. And we know that you're going to continue doing that. And most importantly, you're keeping that flag of Dharma flying very high. Pandit Ishwar, Pandit Umarat, any closing comments? And then we'll ask Pandit Lomas to give his closing comments and just close off with closing prayer.
Okay, Pandit Lomas, all I will say is that first of all, as members of the family, we are very proud of you. You have achieved a lot, not only in the field of education, but also in the field of sports. Those of you who do not know him, the excellent left-handed batsman like Ganguly, difficult to get out. So you have achieved in all aspects of life. And we always speak about the balance of life, spiritual, mental, social, physical. I think you are an example of that. And I think that you are an example for younger ones, that being as qualified as you are, what you have achieved at a very young age, and not being carried away with only certification, but you are also an educated individual. And I always remember the word of my Nana, the late Shankaracharya, a big difference between certification and education. Certification, you know what that means, and education, no education, what that means. But you have education and certification. I think that you are like a beacon in the United States, that at some point in time, we hope that, you will be able to, have others around you, as Panajera mentioned, that will advocate change in the right path. As you keep mentioning, the culture is different, but I think from what science, what research have proven in both Trinidad and Guyana, the purest form of Hinduism is practiced. And that, we could, not to condemn anybody else, but this was actually research done, documented research. And that wherever you are, truly, the foundation you have from your father and from Shankaracharya and your uncles and maybe to a less extent your cousins, the other ones, that you'll be able to maintain, to help to maintain culture, Sanatan Dharma in a very pristine way in the United States and maybe extended to other parts of the world.
Pandit, sure.
Yes, I want to echo the same sentiments of Panajai that Pandit Loma to Pandit Lomas. We're very proud of you, happy to have you on the program, and certainly as a Pandit of Swaha, a young dynamic Pandit. And I know there are many people that still ask about Pandit Lomas and where's Pandit Lomas, what is he doing? Because I'm talking about other individuals who would know him well, and I guess may have known Pandit Gyandeo. Of course, right? And so the reality is you are making a tremendous impact, or you have had an impact on the lives of many people. And even though you're abroad, people still, reflect upon some of the discourses and the messages you that can be found on IETV and on social media. And I want to encourage you, Panaji, to continue to contribute in a meaningful way as you have been doing. And I really am eager to hear Pandit Jaidat and Pandit Lomas, this intersection, as we said, of science and spirituality. So I do hope we can, if it's next week, if not next week, the week right after, that we could have Pandit Lomas back on, because I know we said it in the beginning for viewers. We apologize that, this happens sometimes when you have Pandits together talking about other things rather than what we intended to be the main topic. But I hope you don't mind that you would have still learned something from the program today. Thanks, Panditji.
Thanks. And Pandit Lomas, any final comments, and you can end off with closing prayer.
Sure. So firstly, I'd like to say, thank you for these kind words. It's always nice to hear these things. And personally, I can say, growing up, even though we are the same generation, the three of you included, and the other cousins, the older ones, you're the ones that we look up to, coming from my group, the younger ones. So it's always nice to see, the things that you all accomplish, and we strive to kind of follow that footstep and try and follow and carry on, the family tradition. And of course, I'll be happy to be back, to join discussions again. That's a very interesting area where we look at the similarities in terms of Hinduism, spirituality, and science, and we can draw different comparisons and parallels. So, of course, I'll be happy to be back. So, as we conclude, we join in closing prayer. Om Asatoma Sadgamya, Om Tamasoma Jyotirgamya, Om Mityurma Amritangamya, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Bole Shri Swaha Mata Ki.
Jai. Sitaram.